So first, welcome to the people physically here, also the people in the live stream. I'm Camilo Villouta. I'm a Putnam postdoctoral research fellow here at the Arboretum, and I've been here for a year and a half now. Um, as you can tell from my beautiful accent, I'm from Chile, so I'm not an English native speaker. So if you have like a question that I'm not pronouncing correctly, or I start to say words that don't exist, please let me know. Um, so today we're gonna talk about winter bud adaptation. That's part of the main part of my work, what I've been doing research, and it's the current research that I'm doing here at the Arboretum. And to start, so we know that plants, in contrast to animals, they cannot move as animals. So in areas like this, when we have temperate climate and it's very cold in winter, plants cannot seek shelter or migrate as animals. So they have developed different strategies to survive these temperatures. So um, these strategies can be seen in from two angles. One is in when they have to develop these adaptations for freezing temperatures, and what are the strategies to survive. So we have more people going to give them some handouts, and so first I'm going to start with the when.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm back.
Yes.
Thank you.
You choose.
Thanks.
Here we are. So first, I'm going to start with the when. So if you go to the second page of the handout, we're going to start talking about dormancy. So dormancy is when trees stop growing once a year. They decrease all their metabolic activities. Um, they stop growth, and all this with the purpose to uh, survive winter, accumulate reserves for the next growing season. So, but dormancy can be subdivided in three types of dormancy, and this is relevant for the bud survival talk that we're going to have today. So talking about buds, the first strategy is paradormancy. You always have to pay attention in the prefix in the first word. So paradormancy means that, let's think in summer, maybe the trees still have fruits and we see the new buds are there, but those buds are not growing. So something is stopping those buds from growing, and that source is coming from another part of the plant. That's why it's paradormancy. And this is not super important for our purposes today. So then we start having like shorter days, colder temperatures, and these are the environmental cues that the trees start to detect, and they start to get ready more for winter. And when this happens is when they start to prepare, and they start in a state named endodormancy, which is endo, the part of the word. It means that the source, what is arresting growth in the bud, comes from within the bud. So now we have biochemical, metabolic changes inside the bud that they're keeping them from growing. And let's say we have a tree endodormant in a pot, and then we change it to spring, summer. This tree is not going to grow. Nothing's going to happen because in order to overcome endodormancy, they have to be exposed to chilling temperatures. Now, how many chill temperatures? That depends on the species, that even of the cultivar. And that, I'm going to talk later about that. So let's say these trees, we are in the middle of the winter, they accumulated all the chill that they needed, and they're going to become ecodormant. They overcame endodormancy. And once they are ecodormant, it's the environment that keeps them from growing. The buds potentially is receptive to warm temperatures, but because we're in the middle of the winter, it's not going to grow because we still have cold temperatures. Those cold temperatures keep them from growing. So we have these three stages of dormancy. And what is very important is when occurs the transition from endo to ecodormancy. And we're going to revisit this later. So then how this relates to the cold hardiness, because this is just how the growth stops. But the other layer of this is when the bud starts to develop whatever it helps them to resist cold temperatures. And when endodormancy starts, is when they start to acclimate and they start to become more and more cold hardy. And if you see the red line here represents how the cold temperature that kills the bud of the tree. So as we are in endodormancy, this temperature starts going down, they start to acclimate, and then in winter they reach their maximum cold hardiness. And then at some point in winter, they do a shift from endo to ecodormancy. And once they're in ecodormancy, they start to deacclimate. As soon as we start having warm temperatures, they start to deacclimate. We don't see it. We basically will see the plants as they are right now, but they are becoming less and less resistant to cold temperatures. So now that we have this part of the when these processes occur, now I'm gonna do a little jump to how ice or propagates in plant tissue. So if you see the page 4, uh, so when you have like any freezing process of water in anything in the food or in the plants, there's a little release of heat that is produced. It's like a fraction of a degree. But that if you are recording the freezing process with a thermal camera, you're going to be able to see the freezing, how it moves along the plant. So what we have here is a cranberry shoot. This is my because my research used to be in cranberries, and the white part will be the ice is forming and it's moving up. This is the same shoot. One is taking a 1 second, and like a few seconds later, it's taking the other one. And you can see how the white starts to propagating. That's the ice is moving. And ice in plants, once they starts forming, it moves fast. Could be between 1 or 2 inches per second. So in the case here, I mean, it's hard to see, but you will see that the ice stops just at the base of the bud. And that's also important for what we're going to talk now. And but in my experience and what is being studied, most of the time, ice in plants starts from the base up on some point in the stem and it starts to propagate up. So that means that the bud is always face to ice from the base, from the connection of the stem. The ice all most of the time comes from the area. So all the adaptation of the bud goes to the base. To that's the battle front of the bud versus the ice. So now I think I'm teaching you all these different principles, and then we're gonna put them together. So, and then you're seeing, okay, we're seeing this ice. The ice is forming in the stem. The ice is forming in the leaves. So these there are certain tissues and plants that are able to tolerate ice formation. So, for example, you see the rhododendrons, like they keep all the leaves, and they freeze and thaw in winter several times. They're fine because those tissues are able to tolerate the formation of ice. But the buds, they're not. So, and they're so precious. That's the thing. The buds are so important for the plant. For example, if someone knows what a meristematic tissue is, okay. So the buds are important. One of the reasons is because they have meristematic tissues. And those are the group of cells that starts dividing and divide. And from those group of cells dividing is where we have the new structures, the new leaves. So those are growth points of growth for the plants. So that's why buds are important. And as I was saying, like leaves can tolerate ice formation, meristematic points they cannot. If they will have ice forming within those cells, those cells will die. So that's why the plant invests in protecting the bugs.
Can you say that word again? Meristematic?
Yes, exactly like that.
Meristematic. Okay.
Or there will be a meristem, and then people will talk about the shoot apical meristem or a flower meristem. Okay, but the group of cells dividing is the meristem. So now let me think. So
So Camilo, this is Cheryl. I have a question from the live stream audience.
tell me.
And I'm not sure if you answered it clearly enough for this person asking how the rhododendron bud does survive.
So I haven't. So I'm talking with live stream someone here. That's why. uh, so the person is asking how the rhododendron bud survives. So I think I'm gonna answer the. I haven't reached that point yet. So I'm gonna go to that point, but I'm not there yet. I don't want to mess with the order of the talk. Is that okay?
That's perfect.
Okay, perfect. So we were talking that in late summer we have the bud, and they're being formed. But if you, in some point between late summer and in the fall, if you cut in half a bud, if you look with a loop, you're gonna be able to see that they have preformed structures. They're gonna have preformed little flowers or preformed leaves or both. So that's why they're important because the plant gains time preforming these structures in the year before, and then they have to survive all winter in order to be just ready for spring. As soon we have the good temperatures, they start growing. So that's why they're important. So I wanted to show you. No, I think now. So now we're gonna talk about. Now that I give you all this context, I want to talk about how the buds exactly survive. So in the flowering plants, there are two described strategies. That's how they are the name. Strategies about. And this is this and this part, the number 5. And the names are a little extravagant, but they're also self-explanatory. So one is named deep supercooling, and the other one is named extra organ freezing. So I say in flowering plants because conifer are a different world. So we're not going to talk about those today. We're just going to talk about flowering plants. And so let's talk first about extra organ freezing. So we have the bud, and I was telling you how ice propagates and always, most of the time, reaches the bud from the base up. So the important part of the bud is the base, right? It's like where the bud is is where the bud the ice reaches the bud. And this strategy, what happens is first they freeze the bud scales, the little leaves that cover outside the bud. And the bud scales, they can tolerate ice. So they do freeze and they do form little icicles. And these little icicles, they are dry in certain way. They're able to suck more water. So these icicles from outside dehydrate the little tissues inside, the purple ones. And these little tissues, the meristematic tissues, the little tiny flowers and little leaves, are able to remain ice free because they are dehydrated, yes, at a certain degree. So that's the important part of this species. I mean, this type of species. They
Dehydrate.
they dehydrate these little tissues. Just the inside is able. So the thing is how they can avoid ice because they reduce the amount of water. So, and for example, these three, this is a Prunus serotina. These three, they survive through this strategy. And so I want to show you. I don't know if so. The thing is, there's one species that does this super cooling, but it's over there. So maybe we want to walk to that species and explain you there. You want that?
Camilo, this is Cheryl. Camilo,
Cheryl, give me a second. Someone is
Yep.
asking here. Yeah, tell me.
The extra organ freezing. The theory is that you can't freeze if there's no water.
Right.
Exactly.
But I mean, when plants get that dehydrated, is that going to damage them too?
But this is just we're talking. This is a tiny little portion of the bud. Like we're not talking about entire plant. It's like the bud is already tiny, and this is a little fraction inside of the bud.
And
Yeah.
it's protected from the outer leaves. I mean, there's. all
The
the
bud scales also
scales,
protect.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Camilo, it's me again. It's Cheryl again. Are you getting another question there?
I'm getting another question here.
Okay.
Is it truly the drying, or is it like a change in concentration of like salt or some other chemical in the water that is kind of changing the freezing point of the?
So, yeah, so the question is if there, besides the dehydration, there is also like an accumulation of solutes, like you said, salts, could be sugars. So there's so many variants of these strategies that what is conveying the ice formation protection could definitely be the accumulation of solids. Yes. So one part that I didn't go too far, and because I forgot, I'm gonna say now. So I was telling that the ice propagates up and then it stops, and then all this strategy starts to work. So there's a lot of research trying to understand what actually stops the ice. That's the thing, and there's several like ideas. One idea, do you know what xylem is?
Oh.
So, well, just in case I can explain, xylem will be like is the vascular tissue of the plant. So, one hypothesis is that the vascular tissues stop here in the base and they don't reach out. And ice moves out faster through the xylem because it's where you have the like more free water. So ice moves faster through the xylem. But if you don't have a xylem connection to the inner part of the bud, that will help to isolate. The other thing is different, like you were saying, different depositions. They will try to make the cells more compact, will make the cell walls more, how do you say, impermeable? Is that a word? So all they're different, and that is more like a species to species case. But definitely the most universal factor described is being like the interruption of the vascular connection. So let's move to the other two. Oh, yes.
And Camilo?
I
Can
have
pop in?
another question for the public here.
You want me
Oh,
or do you want, or can I ask
the
you a
per-
question now for, we have a couple questions here. Can I ask you now?
This person is talking.
Okay.
Tell me, Cheryl.
So one of them is, would it help? And I'm guessing this is because magnolias are traditionally so fragile in the early spring because they bud out so quickly and flower. Someone is asking if wrapping a magnolia bud in burlap would help to forestall it freezing.
Wrapping in what material?
In a burlap, a material.
I don't think so because the propagation will move within the branch. Will be if the propagation of ice, if the branch is freezing, the ice will propagate from within the branch.
From within the branch.
Yeah,
Right. That makes
that
sense.
that might protect from maybe from dehydration, from dry winds, but not from the ice coming from the branch.
Great. Okay. And then I have a couple others. I think one is, we're having a cold snap this Friday to Saturday. How is that going to affect things?
I think that depends of the. I think my first question is, I'm not sure what a cold snap is.
Well, it's going to get very cold. It's going to drop really fast and be very much colder than it has been.
So I was
Quickly.
talking about, yeah. So so definitely I was talking about the strategies that the buds have to survive. They rely into like a common freezing rate. Normally 1 degree Celsius per hour is what plants are used to. So if the freezing rate is way faster, that definitely increases the chances of damage in plants. And if you say fast, I will be concerned. And the other factor is depends. If we are talking about a species that is already ecodormant, maybe they are already deacclimating, so it will be even more risky for those species.
Okay. One other quick question. I hope I can read this right. It's, would the sap have an antifreeze type chemical that keeps it from extreme freezing and ice damage? The sap itself?
So the sap what will help the sap from freezing will be the high concentration of solvent or sugars. Definitely that decreases the freezing point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What's that one? So now we're walking towards Prunus americana, which is a species that does deep supercooling. It's a tiny tree that we just are arriving at. Maybe we can go this way, or we prefer to stay in the road. So now we're this is the tree that we came to visit. This is Prunus americana, and actually, let me just confirm. I don't want to be lying. Yes, I'm right. um, so now we're going to talk about the other survival strategy, which is deep supercooling. And have you ever seen? First, I'm going to talk about the phenomenon of supercooling in general. Have you ever seen these videos on internet when you have a bottle of water that's super cold, but it's liquid, and then they heat it and it freezes super fast? So basically, supercooling. Okay, I'm going to explain. So supercooling, it means we know that water freezes at 32, but there's sometimes under certain conditions that water can remain liquid and is below 32. So that water will be in a super cooled state. And we do know that a super cooled state is unstable. That's why they freeze so fast. There are certain conditions that so in order to a freezing event to occur, we know we need something named like a nucleator, someone that starts all the freezing. And normally that can be dust, it could be movement, but as temperatures decrease more far from freezing, more down, the requirements for nucleators are less important, and everything can nucleate and start ice formation. So, but basically, this capacity of liquid to remain liquid below freezing exists, and it's named supercooling. So plants do use this. And so as I was saying in the extra organ freezing part that we had dehydration, in this case, we have the ice also coming from the stem up. We also have ice, what is denominated as an ice barrier, stopping the ice. And this structure is able to remain ice-free by supercooling. So even when it's at temperatures below freezing, the water content of those cells is able to remain liquid. And that's how those cells and those tissues are able to avoid freezing. So right now, for example, my study here at the Arboretum is to try to understand what a plant, because for example, we just saw a Prunus species from the genus Prunus that survived through exorgan freezing. And now we have another Prunus species here that survives through deep supercooling. So the question will be like, why? What a plant evolving to one strategy or the other sacrifice or gain doing this? So that's the study that I'm trying to do that right now. Hypotheses could be super cool buds that do deep supercooling. This is an hypothesis. Could develop larger flowers in the fall, and those could survive through the winter, and then they will have larger flowers in the spring and larger fruits. That's an hypothesis versus the species doing extra organ freezing. Just by the physics of the logics of the physics, if we have a tinier flower, it will be easier to dehydrate a tinier flower. So that is the logic that I'm trying to apply there, and we will see if that is true or not. So I just wanted to show you, we have some buds if you want to cut them and to see the structures inside. So we brought here, we have some, can you help me? So just for you to see the differences in sizes of the flowers inside. So this one here is Prunus armeniaca, which is basically apricot. It's also from here, from the Arboretum. And This one is a species that is known to do supercooling. So I'm gonna cut several in half so people can see them. Let's see. I wanted to have this prepared, but they dehydrate so fast once they're cut. So you can see one there.
That's the one that we are seeing here, or another.
This is very similar to the one that you're seeing. It's just that I already have these branches cut, so I didn't want to cut more.
Right.
There's another one there. So, and you can see there is a one big flower. It's like a round structure. And if you look at your handouts, you're gonna be a big picture of it. Is the one at the left. It's not a good cut. So, and that's where you can see the big difference in flowers. Uh-huh.
Is the strategy innate to a plant or can it change because of external?
As far as we know, there is part of the it wouldn't, yes, will be like a congenital genetic predisposed situation, like a strategy. It's not like they could change it.
So
As far as we know now.
external events or environment do not cause a plant to change its strategy.
I want to say no, but I'm not certain because I'm thinking for example, the buzzer you're seeing now is one big flower. What happened? I'm thinking, what happened if the environment made them to have very tiny flowers instead of the big one you're gonna see now? Will that end up be dehydrating? That's what keeps me from saying yes or no. I don't know. Yeah. So, oh, I'm sorry, you have a question.
Yeah, what happens when we have a month like we just had? Every day was above normal, so the entire month except one day.
So,
How does that affect?
yeah, that's a very good.
A lot of buds coming out that wouldn't normally be coming out.
So the question is, what will be the impact of this last month where temperatures were above normal? So I was talking a lot
This last what?
month where the temperatures were super warm.
Okay.
So so I was telling you about we have the endodormancy that needs chilling to be overcome. That if the plants are still in the dormancy and we have warm temperatures, nothing's going to happen. So if we are talking about a species that during these months were still in endodormancy, these months maybe they didn't accumulate the normal quantity of chilling that they should. And what happens when the plants don't accumulate what they need, then we have a spring. What's going to happen? We're going to have a very diffuse blooming. So if normally you for a prunus species will expect like all the buds blooming, maybe one bud is going to be blooming, other one not. So
Want me to hold it?
so that's going to be a big consequence. And if we're talking about, for example, an orchard where they want to produce, that's going to be tragic for them because that's going to be maybe half of the production because they're going to have half of the flowers. And for people that want more the ornamental side of plants, also they're not going to have like a pretty blooming bush or tree. It's going to be like just the spots. So those could be consequences. But now, if we're talking about a plant that was already ecodormant and we have warm temperatures, that plant was deacclimated and was getting less and less cold hardy. And now we're going to have this cold snap and it's going to increase the chances of damaging all those spots. And we also going to see problems in the next spring with maybe the amount of flower that we should have seen or not. So yeah, that's
Like a few years ago when the magnolias, it got too warm, the magnolias opened up and we lost all of the yellow magnolias.
yeah, that happens. That's like a clear example of consequences. Okay, let me.
Just what you said, I'm sorry, what kind of
This is super cooling. This is
But it's a,
what species?
yeah.
Is Prunus armeniaca, which is apricot.
Like this.
This is Prunus americana, but also survives through deep supercooling. But I'm not fully sure about the common name of this species, though, which should be here. But American plum. This is so. Now we're in the last part of our talk today. So we've been talking a little about this. About now we're going to the number 7. So about chilling quantification. So horticulturists have developed different models to quantify um, how much exposure to chilling temperatures the plant have. Um, so there are so many models. There's different ways to do it, but there's the most heard on the most I don't want to say conventional, but the one that you're gonna hear the most is the chilling hours model, which is the first one, and the one here. And for example, that one will count all the hours below 45 Fahrenheit, which I think is 7 Celsius, and above 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit. In fall, all the hours that the plant was exposed from the fall to, then another question will be, since when I start counting? Some people will start counting since the 70% of the leaves were dropped. And you start counting all the hours, and that's how you can quantify. And for example, if you go to the sheet in the back, this is, for example, it shows you the square here. How big is the diversity of chilling hours requirement that different species have? You can see for figs, they can have below 400, and the northern pawpaw can have, I don't know, can require until 1800. So, and even among species in the other table, you can have between cultivars of the same species, they can have different requirements of chilling hours. And why this is important? Because for example, you were giving me the example of the magnolias. If you plant a species that with a very small requirement of chilling hours and is planted in an area like here, we have a lot of chilling hours. The transition from endodormancy to ecodormancy is going to occur, like, let's say, late December. And if we have like a warm spell, like some days of warm temperatures, those plants are going to think it's spring and they're going to start opening and they're going to be super not cold hardy. And then because we know in January we're still going to have freezing temperatures, all those buds are going to die. So that's why it's very important to know this information at the moment of planting and according to the historical chilling that a place might have. Because all this evolution of timing of increasing cold hardiness, the most important thing here is synchrony between what the plant is reads from the environment and what is actually happening in the environment. And
Camilo, when you have a chance, I have a question for you.
I have questions from the
Live
public
stream?
now. Yeah,
Yep,
tell me.
Good question. Do flower buds and leaf buds on the same plant use the same strategy to avoid freezing damage?
So someone is asking, is flower buds and leaf buds have the same strategy? I will say that I've been focusing flower buds. All this talk has been about flower buds. Leaf buds tend to be more cold hardy, and I think they are. I don't have a clear answer. I will say that they differ, and normally leaf buds are way more cold hardy.
And a quick other question that goes along with the buds. If the buds freeze and die, can they remake new ones?
So if a bud freezes and dies, if the plant can make new ones. So I think that depends on the plants, but normally what happens is a plant will have a window of time during their development when they are able to produce buds. And one thing is to produce buds, and another different thing is to produce flower buds. Certain species will require very specific conditions to produce flowers. They can still produce buds, but they could be just leaf buds. So I will say that it's very unlikely. For example, at least in flower buds, if the flower bud died in the winter, I will not think you're gonna have flower buds in the next spring. I have
Thank-
questions for the people here, Sherry.
Yep, thank you.
That reminds me again of the magnolia. There's buds on a lot of the magnolias I see now. So are they gonna, do you know what's
So-
gonna happen to them?
So if I what
Specific to that plant.
she's trying to the same question, but to the magnolias here. So what I will expect is if a flower bud died now, that flower bud is not gonna be replaced for this spring. We're gonna have to have all the spring growth, all the summer, and wait for those new buds to grow. That's what happens.
You have these lines on the grape, dot, 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 dot. What does that mean?
It's just that it's so big the difference according to variety.
Oh, okay.
There's
Varieties.
different varieties. For example, in Minnesota and Wisconsin, they're working with these cold hardy grapes. So there's a whole big variety.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
a question about buds that contain both leaf and flowers.
Mhm.
Does that, I mean, so like the maples have some buds that are just leaves and some buds that are leaves and flowers.
Yeah, so that depends on the species. Certain species they make when I say reproductive buds, some species will make like you say mixed buds. Have both things, or other species will make just flowers. That depends on the specific species. Your question is if that is a factor. I will say no. I will say that as long as it has the flower, that's the important part. Mhm.
Discussions.
Yep.
So, the strategies, survival strategies that you talked about, super cooling versus extra organ freezing. When it comes to climate change, do we know which one of these strategies is going to work better?
So the question is if among the two strategies that I described, deep supercooling, extra freezing, if one represent or has advantages regarding climate change. Let me think. I haven't think about that. So, I don't know. I wouldn't know which one will be an advantage or
You have
disadvantage.
your own lab, you can assign a postdoc to that.
Because I'm thinking they have their own restrictions or their own limits. For example, the deep supercooling strategy, because of the physical properties of water, is known that it will not survive in areas with below minus 40 Celsius, which I think is minus 40 Fahrenheit too. I'm not sure. Yeah. But I don't know if there's a theoretical limit for the extra organ freezing one. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. But good question.
Needs to be studied.
Can I ask
Any
you,
more?
Camilo?
I have a
Can
question. Yeah, sure. tell me.
Yeah, okay. So I also have a question about the lack of snow that we've had this year for providing, the moisture slowly going down to the roots, which, as this audience member has mentioned, it's important for maple syrup sap flow. How is that lack of snow affecting other parts of the plant?
So the question is if the lack of snow or snow melting and the humidity going to the roots, and giving the example of how maple trees, how was it? How trees
For the syrup,
rely?
yeah, the sap
the-
from, tapping maple trees for their sap. It would be important for that slow percolation, as they're saying, of the slow melt going down into the roots. If
So
there's
it
no
seems like
snow cover.
for maple trees, for the maple syrup production, it's important that this having a slow percolation of water to the roots. So I will think, so as far as I know, the restarting of xylem activity, everything starts more in like the ecodormant stage. So I wouldn't know in the case of actual trees if the lack of a snow cover will have an effect. Yeah, I wouldn't know what was the effect with the maple trees exactly.
Okay,
Okay, I think are those all the questions, Cheryl?
I have one small question, same person. He says he has I think it's a he, but sorry if it's not. They have a ground cluster plant that's pushing up sprouts now. Is that going to be vulnerable? I assume that's the question to the freezing.
So they have the question is about a specific plant that is having shoots now, and yeah, definitely those shoots are gonna be exposed and most likely gonna be damaged by this cold snap that you described is coming.
Thank you. That's it from the
You're
live stream.
welcome. Okay, thank you.
One quick question
yeah, tell me.
over here, with the quince, those are buds for flowers or are they berries or those are?
Oh, I don't know. Like, so the location of flower buds of vegetative buds, I mean vegetative is for leaves, is a very case specific. Some species will have at the base of the leaf or of the branch, other ones will be at the tip. So the answer is I don't know about this specific species, but yeah, that's a very characteristic by each species.
Yeah, are any of your findings going to be published in Arnoldia or any other place we can access them?
My plan is as a personal preference. I mean, in a scientific journal for sure, but I always target to publish with open access. I guess so. So that will be the answer. Yes, will be accessible.
Yes. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think.
You're cold hardy without gloves.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Uh,
Nice job.
Thanks.